Started online therapy after a panic attack, but one day my therapist said something that made me realize she was actually my estranged sister using a fake name to spy on me and report everything back to our estranged father. The panic attack hit me in Trader Joe's of all the stores. I was just standing in the produce stand, waiting in line to purchase a bag of spinach, and then I couldn't breathe any longer. My heart was racing like I'd just completed a marathon jog, and my hands were shaking so badly that I dropped the bag. I tried to steady myself on the cart, but it was like the whole store came in to squish me. I abandoned it all, cart, money, phone, and just ran straight to my car. I sat there for almost 40 minutes, staring at the steering wheel, trying to remember how to breathe like a normal person. That evening I googled, "How to know if you are losing your mind?" And the prognosis was dire. That's when I knew that I needed to seek help pronto. I didn't want to be wandering around like a human time bomb. So I signed up for this online therapy service. Chose the first name that sounded kind and warm. Erica R. Her picture seemed friendly. Brown hair swept back into a messy ponytail, soft eyes, warm smile. We started with text messages first, then moved on to weekly video calls. And I'll be honest, she was good. She didn't interrupt me. She asked just enough questions to get me to dig deeper, but not so many that I felt exposed. I told her about the attack, the work stress, about waking up at 3 a.m. each night with constricting chest and whirling head. I told her about my family, as well. How we had all but been decimated beyond repair. How I had not spoken with my father in over 10 years. How my older sister, Naomi, just walked out when I was 15 and never returned. She never said goodbye. That part one sort of casual like told Erica. But really still hurts. Naomi was my whole life growing up. 10 years older than me, she was more like a mother rather than a sister. She packed my lunches at school, taught me to braid my hair, even stashed notes into my backpack when I worried about tests. And then she simply disappeared, in the evening. I recall the front door closing. I recall sitting on the stairs in the dark, waiting for her to come back and speak. But she did not. I learned from cousins that she relocated out west. Got a job, got hitched, perhaps even had a child. But never a thing directly from her. No phone calls. No text messages. Just nothing. So when Erica asked me if I was okay with that, I laughed and said, "Guess I just got used to people disappearing." She became very quiet afterwards. Usually she'd respond with something like, "That hurts," or, "Go on about that." But this time she just stared. I felt like the rapport had frozen over, so I started waving. "Hey, you hear me?" She blinked furiously, like she'd just come out of a trance. "Yeah, sorry. Just a glitch on my end." But after that, things were different. The next few sessions, she was more intense. Like, she was constantly returning to my sister, inquiring if I ever tried looking for her, if I would ever like to meet with her. I found it odd, but I attributed it to her being thorough. Then one night, I was showing her a drawing that I had done. I draw sparingly, just as a stress reliever. This was a pencil sketch of a woman walking away in the distance from a little girl, rather metaphorical, I suppose. Erica leaned right forward to the screen, gazed at it for hours, and then said, "Naomi always did like drawing too, didn't she?" I froze. I couldn't remember telling her that. On the contrary, I knew I hadn't. I had not said Naomi's name as much, and when I did, I was careful not to sound too intimate. I was still holding on to this peculiar childhood compulsion to protect her, even though she did not protect me. I rolled my throat and announced, Yeah, she did." Then I laughed, trying to lighten the mood. Perhaps it runs in the family. Erica smiled, but her smile looked forced. "Maybe," she said. That interview stayed with me. I kept replaying it in my head. The way she said the name Naomi. Like it was something personal to her. Something hurtful. The next day, I went back through our old chat histories, just to see if I'd done something I couldn't remember. But I hadn't. I even searched for Naomi. Through the transcripts, came up only twice. Once when I said her name, and once when Erica did. That's when I started to feel paranoid. I know, ironic, huh? Therapy's designed to make you feel safer. But then out of the blue I couldn't shake this feeling that something was off. I started noticing little things. Like how Erica never talked about her own life. I know they're not supposed to, but most therapists will eventually let a tiny detail leak now and then. A pet. A city they live in. She never did that. And then the way she sounded. It didn't quite hit me until one night I recorded a screenshot of one of our sessions, just for journaling. I swear I wasn't being weird, but I picked up on the way she said certain words. The same rhythm. The same gentle R's. Naomi used to have a voice like that. Calming. Melodic, really. I felt as though I was losing it. I even searched for Erica's face, reverse image search. Nothing. Her profile picture did not appear elsewhere on the internet. And that made me all the more suspicious, not less. So I started to investigate. I comforted myself by thinking I was crazy. I mean, what were the odds? My estranged sister, with whom I had not had a conversation in over 10 years, playing therapist just to snoop on me? It was preposterous even in my own head. But then so was the idea of someone disappearing from your life like you never existed. And that had already happened. So I went on. I dug out our old family pictures, removing each picture I had of Naomi in her early 20s, just in case. And in one of them, she was sitting on a park bench, pulled back hair, no makeup, slouch type, but smiling. I looked at it side by side with the fuzzy shot I'd taken of Erica at our last session. The similarity was unsettling. Dimmer lighting, older face, but the jawline, the eyes, even the curl of her lip up a little higher on the right side of her mouth, it all lived. My heart was pounding so hard I couldn't hear anything else but it. I had to be certain. Not a hunch, not a fuzzy likeness. Real evidence. Next time around, I thought I would give it a shot. Casually, like I wasn't even attempting to set a trap. We were talking about family again. She had brought it up, naturally, and I mentioned how our previous dog Max used to sleep at the door of my bedroom growing up. You know what's weird? I said to her, watching her face. He'd always go wild and bark at Dad, but never so much as growl at Naomi. Not even when she'd sneak out of the house late at night. Erica's smile was tight. Maybe he knew something about your father, she said. And then she did it. She looked down and whispered. Max was a good dog. I swear my whole body iced over. She'd never heard his name. I had never spoken it. Never. And that whisper, it was not an observation a therapist would make. It was memory. Her memory. I wanted to scream at her. Commanded of her in the moment. But I didn't. I smiled and nodded, pretending everything was normal while inside I was doing reverse somersaults. I sat by myself in my room afterwards, just staring at the screen for what seemed like hours. My mind was racing. Why would she do this if she truly was Naomi? Why come back into my life like this, with an alias? Why not just call me up and get in touch like a normal person would? And then it dawned on me. My father. The man we had both run away from. I hadn't said much about him, just occasional remarks here and there. But now she'd been asking me more and more about him. Do you ever ask yourself if he's changed? Would you ever be willing to hear from him someday? Do you think you've recovered enough from that relationship? It didn't feel like curiosity. It felt like setup. Like she was fishing. That's when it hit me. What if she wasn't here for me anyway? What if she was working on an assignment for him? Gathering intel. About what I recalled. About what I'd say. About how I'd react if he returned. It revolted me. I wanted to shut her down, report her on the app, dump it all out in a review. But some portion of me wasn't prepared. I needed to know. I needed her to say it. To admit it out loud. So I waited. In the next session, I didn't utter much. I allowed her to talk, allowed her to squirm. And she did. She kept asking these strangely specific questions, such as, did you ever get the sense that Naomi protected you? And would you forgive someone if they went away to save themselves but left you behind? I wanted to weep. Not that I was upset. Because I was furious. I finally spoke up. You know, it's interesting. I used to think if Naomi came back, she'd apologize. Perhaps say she'd miss me. But now I'm not so certain. She looked dumbfounded. Why do you say that? Why? She asked. Because I think if she did come back impersonating someone else just in order to gain information, that'd be kinda messed up. Don't you agree? She stayed silent for a while. She didn't say anything. Her eyes were watery, like she was about to cry but was restraining herself. And then she told me the nicest thing I ever remember her saying. "You were just a kid." I couldn't breathe. That wasn't an answer. That was a confession. She didn't say no. She didn't ask me what I was implying. She just said it. My eyesight dimmed, my head was waterlogged. "Why?" I barked. "Why now?" Her lips parted as if she was going to speak, but then the screen faded to black. Undefined, she ended the session. Undefined, like the top level gone. Undefined, I was stuck there in a daze. Undefined for hours. Undefined, and the worst part wasn't the deception roughen, it wasn't even the light posite, it was that she didn't remain posite again, odorless like last time. Plis, she vanished. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd see her face on that screen, older, heavier around the eyes, maybe a little sadder, but still Naomi. Still my sister. And that sentence, "You were just a kid," it kept repeating in my head like a broken record. It wasn't an explanation. It wasn't even close. But it was something. And after years of hearing nothing from her, that was more than I'd ever had. The next morning, I got on the therapy app, all ready to message her. No, not her, Naomi. I had a million things to say, and none of them made sense in my head, but I was gonna say 'em anyway. Only, her profile wasn't there. Just poof. The message thread was still there, but they had replaced her name with, "This therapist is no longer available." I checked my email. Nothing, no notification, no warning, nothing. It was as if she had been erased. Like she had never existed in the system to begin with. I contacted support, pretending to be a bewildered client. I asked why my therapist had been removed and if I was allowed to reach out to them for closure or to send notes onto a new one. They told me they had no other information, only that the therapist had left the platform. When I pressed further, they told me that a member of the internal review team would reach out. They never did. I was losing my mind again. And some part of me wondered if that had been the plan all along. Get close. Gather information. Disappear. I started pacing the apartment, drilling holes into the floorboards with questions there were no answers for. Why the trouble? Why the alias, the therapist act, the sessions, the digging into feelings? If she had needed to speak, why not just speak? Unless she couldn't. Unless this had absolutely nothing to do with me at all. I couldn't get our dad out of my head. Our manipulative, controlling dad who could get people to do things they didn't want to do. Who manipulated our lives as if they were his own. Who turned Naomi into a parent when she was a child herself, and made me into a repressed little shadow who was scared to breathe too loudly. What if he found out? What if he made her do this? I did not want to believe she'd agree to something like this. But I also did not know who she was anymore. The one I knew, the defender, the fearless one, that one had gone away when she'd left. I was left with whatever this was now. A ghost pretending to be a stranger. A sister who wouldn't give me her own name. A spy. I spun for the next week. Couldn't work, barely ate, didn't leave the apartment. I just kept thinking maybe she'd get in touch with me. Maybe she'd email, or call, or leave a note like some dramatic movie moment. But nothing. Not a word. I started looking her up. I knew it was probably a dead end. I'd tried it before years ago, but this time I wasn't the same. This time I had something. Her face. A name she might have used elsewhere. I went full internet detective. I searched Naomi's name paired with the alias, Naomi Richardson. Erica Naomi R. I scrolled through inactive Facebook profiles, therapist directories, obituaries even. Nothing concrete. Just digital ghosts. Then I tried LinkedIn. I searched for therapists with the same credentials she claimed to have, the same general age, the same number of years of experience. And after hours of clicking and zooming and comparing pictures, I found a profile. No picture. But the education was the same as Erica had mentioned in passing once. "I did my clinicals in Boston," she'd said in a session once. That's what this profile said too. Clinical hours in Boston. MFT license. Currently marked as private practice, not accepting new clients. And the name? Naomi R. Lawton. My mother's maiden name. I almost threw up. It was her. I knew it in my gut. She'd used a different last name to avoid being found out, maybe by Dad, maybe by me. And I'd found her anyway. But now I didn't know what to do with it. Confronting her was a risk. Not physically. I didn't believe she'd ever hurt me physically. But emotionally? I wasn't sure I'd survive. What if she lied about the whole thing? What if she told the truth but felt no remorse? Or worse, what if she said she did it all for him? That would kill me. But I couldn't let it go. So I emailed her. I kept it short. I just wrote, "I know it's you. I don't know why you did this. But I want answers. I deserve that." I stared at the send button for a good 10 minutes before I even clicked it. By then, I closed the laptop, turned my phone off, and sat on the floor for what felt like an eternity. The next morning, there was a reply. Just one line. "I didn't do this to hurt you. Please let me explain." I didn't answer right away. I read her message at least 20 times, hoping the words would change. They didn't. "I didn't do this to hurt you. Please let me explain." I wanted to scream. That wasn't an explanation. That was a delay. Another vague, distant apology. But I couldn't ignore it. Not after all this. So I took a deep breath, opened a new email, and simply typed, "Then explain." She responded within the hour. It was long, too long for someone who'd hidden behind silence for over a decade. But I read every word. She explained that she'd found me by mistake. My name was brought up in an article, something minor, a work award, and it all came rushing back. She told me she gazed at my name on the screen for almost an hour, weeping. She needed to contact her. Needed to tell her she was sorry. But she did not know how. "What was I to say after 10 years? She typed. "How do you resume where you left off when the person you left behind was a frightened little girl?" That was the most difficult for me to read. Since I had been that girl. And a part of me still was. Naomi explained she'd been in therapy for years, trying to undo everything Dad did to her. To us. She'd left because staying would have meant choosing between her survival and mine, and at 17, she hadn't known how to do both. I always believed she left me behind. And yet here she was telling me she just didn't know how to stay. "He turned me into someone I didn't know," she wrote. "And I thought if I wasn't here, maybe you'd be better off." I read that sentence for a long time. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to scream that she left me with him, that she left without a backward glance. But the truth was, I accepted it. Not because it was okay, but because I'd had years of experience with how hard it was to heal from the injuries he caused. I'd barely managed to escape it myself. She said she invented the Erica persona because she needed an in without scaring me off. She felt that if only she could hear my voice, know how I was doing, maybe get to know who I'd become, then maybe she'd find the courage to actually contact me. But then it got too deep. Too personal. She said when I spoke of her, she wanted to cry. She hadn't expected that I still thought of her. That I'd still care. And when I started to suspect the truth, she panicked. "I didn't want to hurt you again by lying," she wrote. "But I was already in too deep. I didn't know how to stop." The last paragraph was the one that undid me. She said, "You don't have to forgive me. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know, I never stopped being your sister. I never stopped loving you. I just didn't know how to come home." I sat and wept. Harder than I had in years. Not just because of what she'd said, but because of what I needed her to say, and what she finally had. I didn't write back that day. Or the next. I let it sit. Let myself feel every piece of what she'd written. The guilt, the pain, the raw truth. It wasn't enough to fix everything. But it was truthful. A few days later, I wrote one final message. "If you want to be in my life, you have to be in it as yourself. Not as someone else. No more hiding. No more pretending. If you're willing to do that, I'll listen. I'm not promising anything more than that. But I'll listen." She spoke only 2 words in response. "I'm ready." We haven't yet spoken face to face. We've exchanged a few messages since then, slow, cautious, almost like learning a new language. There is pain between us, and history, and miles of silence to overcome. But there's also a small thread that reconnects us again. and for the first time in years, I think that thread just might hold. Maybe not enough to reverse the clock, but maybe enough to start again, slowly, softly, as two people who've both been broken, and are only now learning to speak from the scars.